Hi, I'm Stephen Reich from the pokepress studios in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm on the phone with Try from the My Life in Gaming YouTube channel. And Try, your channel focuses a lot on various technical aspects of video games in terms of getting them to appear correctly and stuff like that. But you've also covered specific games, and you also have done some kind of interesting how to beat videos. How did a channel like that, how did that get started?
Well, Corey and I have known each other online for a long time. I'm one of the founding members of a website called The Backloggery. That's backloggery.com. And it's a collection, a game collection tracking site, sort of with a focus on tracking which games you've beat, which games you've left unfinished. And we just met through there and sort of just hit it off because we're both video editors. And we met with a bunch of other Backloggery people at MagFest, which is a convention, a gaming convention near Washington, D.C. And at some point, Corey was like, we should make a YouTube channel together. There's not a lot of YouTubers out there that I think have like a professional background in video editing, so we thought would be interesting. And the first thing we did was those how to beat videos, sort of inspired by the old VHS tapes that would tell you how to beat Mega Man 2 or Ninja Gaiden or something like that. But we did it with modern games, and I think that was never intended to be the focus of the channel, but we thought it would be an easy thing to do to get started. And it was kind of light and funny, not at all the kind of content we intended to create long term, but it was, I think, a good starting choice because it did get us some attention early on, and we kind of used that as a launching point to get into the other types of videos that we wanted to make.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned before, one of the big things your channel focuses on is video quality, a lot of RGB-related topics and things like that. How did that all get started?
Well, really, that's in a lot of ways, that's kind of the origin of the channel, because part of why we decided to make a YouTube channel was because we had been looking at this website, Hazard City. It's run by this guy in Germany that has so much information on video scalers and stuff, and the FrameMeister, which is this Japanese upscaling box that you can plug RGB from your retro consoles into it, and it's just perfect crisp pixels, and it's amazing. And we're looking at this and thinking, wow, does this really do what it looks like it's doing? I'm not quite sure I believe it. And, Corey finally bought one. He showed me some pictures, and I'm like, okay, I believe it. It's this $300 box, and it's a lot of money, but, you think about it, it's like the price of a modern console. And if retro gaming is important to you, then, it's not that bad of an investment if you really think about it. Between that and some capture cards that we bought, we're like, wow, we've got this like awesome setup for capturing real consoles in such high quality. Like we should put this to good use. But we did not anticipate really making videos about video quality. We just wanted to have really good quality captures for other videos that we would be making. We intended to be making, it's called My Life in Gaming, in part because we wanted to tell stories about games and maybe some personal connections that you might have to those games. Not just us, but we always wanted to interview people. Like for example, when we did a Myst episode, we interviewed the creator of Myst. We wanted to have other people's voices in our videos, if possible. But then we wanted to make this video about the FrameMeister because it introduced us to this whole world of high quality capture, and it just took off. And we're like, well, we could do a whole series about this and all the stuff that it took us so long to figure out. We could make this great resource for other people to discover this, because I think a lot of people didn't know. I mean, we didn't know until just 4 years ago about that this kind of stuff was even possible. So it's just kind of our way of sharing that information, and it was never intended to be the main thing, but it kind of has become that.
So you have actually, in the RGB series, you have a couple levels. 100 is sort of the basics, 200 is system specific, 300 is sort of niche topics. So you're coming in, you're going to be having a new 200 level video, hopefully within the next few weeks. about the Game Boy, which is kind of interesting in part because it's a portable console, so it's not something you would normally think would make a great topic necessarily. But as it turns out, you've come across a lot of things, and this is probably going to be your longest video yet. So how did this get started?
Yeah, it's almost twice as long. I'm looking at my timeline right now, which is about maybe 20 or so percent edited, and it's an hour and 3 minutes. It's more than twice as long as our longest video. Otherwise, yeah, it's absolutely insane. Originally, early on in the series, I was like, oh, I want to do a video about how to play Game Boy games on your TV, and how to get the best quality doing that. Because obviously the options people think of are Super Game Boy on Super Nintendo and the Game Boy player on GameCube, but there's a lot of nuance there. But then Bob from RetroRGB.com, he's the guy that runs RetroRGB. He's been a huge supporter of ours, and he's got a great website and also does a great YouTube channel where he called the Retro Weekly Roundup. And he was like, I need some space, and I know you're planning to do a Game Boy episode. And I think this was around this time last year, actually. He just sent me this big box full of Game Boy stuff. We're talking backlit modded Game Boy and Game Boy Pocket, frontlit modded Game Boy Color, original Game Boy Advance with the brighter backlit SP screen put in it, clock modded Super Game Boy, just all kinds of stuff that I never even would have really thought of looking into because I had this on TV focus. I was like, well, I guess we could just do kind of like an all-encompassing video, but I'm just going to talk about the handheld stuff like really, really briefly. And but then, I just start writing the episode, and I'm like, it got to the point where I'm like, I don't see what I can cut out without being as comprehensive as I want to be, and it's ended up being this big thing. And there's been fleeting thoughts like, oh, maybe we could separate Game Boy and Game Boy Advance into their own episodes, or maybe we can do portables and on TV in separate episodes or something. But it's like there'll be so much overlap between them because there's just so much shared between platforms within the Game Boy series, and you kind of have to understand how Game Boy Color works to understand how Game Boy Player works, and how Game Boy Color backwards compatibility works on Game Boy Advance, and how Super Game Boy has special palettes that are not recreated on any other official hardware. And so it's like, well, let's just include it all in this one massive episode that I'm completely insane for even tackling. We had hoped that it would release Black Friday. Probably not going to happen, but I am keeping that mindset that I'm going to release it on Black Friday. It keeps me motivated. It keeps me that glimmer of hope that I could have it done by then. If I don't keep that, then I'm just going to make terrible progress between now and Thanksgiving. But yeah, it's intense. But I know it's going to be big because people are interested to know more about Game Boy.
No, definitely, and especially, of course, Pokemon fans. Anything in particular you wanted to sort of share that might be specific to the Pokemon games?
Well, certainly for Super Game Boy, it's pretty cool because the way it works is it can draw sort of hidden areas in the screen to have entirely separate color palettes. Normally, you can only assign 4 colors to a Super Game Boy game or a Game Boy game in a Super Game Boy. But a Super Game Boy Enhanced game like Pokemon Red and Blue and, of course, Gen 2, they can... Well, in the battle screen, they can basically draw a box around each Pokemon, and they can be their correct color. They aren't bound by the 4-color limitation because those areas of the screen where those Pokemon exist can have their own color palette. So that's pretty exciting. On the N64 end, we are covering the Wide Boy 64, which was a development tool and a press tool for getting Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance screenshots through an N64. Nothing particularly special regarding Pokemon there, but we are going to look just a little bit into the emulation through Pokemon Stadium and Pokemon Stadium 2, which is kind of interesting because even though it's emulation, you do get the benefit of the Super Game Boy enhancements there. But you can use flashcards. This isn't something we're really going to be able to show directly, but people have experimented with editing ROM headers to trick the Pokemon Stadium games into loading non-Pokemon games. They basically fool into thinking that it's Pokemon Blue or something like that. I understand that they kind of crash like when they try to save and stuff like that. So it's not really a reliable method, but it is kind of interesting.
Well, especially if you could use the double and triple speed options that you can unlock in at least the original Pokemon Stadium to play those games at hyper speed, that might be actually kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, well, with this overclocked Game Boy that I'm borrowing, like it's got this dial where you can literally overclock it or underclock it. It's kind of wonky. I wouldn't really trust it, to be honest. I was told that it's actually kind of intended more for people who want to do something with like the Game Boy sound chip for music or something like that. But there is a dial on it. You could turn it. You could play the game at hyper speed, though. I think it would be pretty likely to crash from what I've experimented with.
All right. Well, we certainly look forward to that Game Boy episode in the near future. In the meantime, what are some of your other plans going forward for the channel? Additional systems, additional topics? What are you looking into?
Well, it's hard to believe we've gone all year without making a new Sega episode, and Saturn and Dreamcast are both pretty high priorities. Dreamcast in particular is very popularly requested, so we want to get back to Sega. We want to do PlayStation 2. We want to do Wii. We basically want to do every system that is realistically possible. Original Xbox and other RGB topics. We want to talk about SCART switchers. We want to talk about all kinds of things. I mean, and outside of RGB, I mean, we always want to take a break and get to our get to our game focused episodes. They're usually they're kind of our reprieve from our more technical episodes because they do take less work, and they're not as popular, but sometimes they're just what we want to do, and we're never going to run out of ideas. We talk about that all the time. Like I just literally cannot imagine I could ever run out of ideas. It's just there's so many things that we just want to talk about, and we've got this list of topics from when we started the channel, and we haven't done but maybe 15% of them because we just keep getting sidetracked by the newest idea we have, and there's just so much we want to talk about, technical and otherwise.
Yeah, it never really ends with this. And of course, in this era of the internet, we've actually had opportunities to learn more as some of the developers and hardware folks have sort of come out of the woodwork. So there's always going to be more. I think you're right about that. Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. You can come up with new things to talk about for retro stuff, and it's... I think a lot of people don't think about that. They think, just what's old is set and done with. But there's so much to it, and so much that people still are doing in that world in terms of new developments to modify the hardware and get new results. But in the meantime, how can folks find your YouTube channel, and do you have any other social media? Well, we've got, of course, YouTube. It's just youtube.com/mylifeingaming. We've also got a @mylifeingaming Twitter, and then we've got our individual personal accounts. Mine is @TryumpHforks, TRYUMPH4KS. It's inspired by the fish in the Wind Waker that call the Triforce the Triumph Forks. And Corey is just @CoreyC, COURYC. And we've also got a Patreon account, just patreon.com/mylifeingaming. And that has gone a long ways to supporting the channel. We've also got Facebook, but I don't know anything about that. I don't fool with Facebook, but Corey pays attention to it. All right. Well, thank you very much, Try. This has been Stephen Reich talking to Try of the My Life in Gaming channel about his upcoming Game Boy related episode.